At 17, I was invincible, or at least I felt that way. Life was one big party. I was out every weekend drinking, smoking, and doing whatever I wanted. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow or any consequences. I was just living in the moment. School felt like a side gig I didn't care much for, and my family was dealing with their own issues. My world revolved around freedom and fun, and I loved being in control of my own life, or so I thought. What I didn't know was that something was growing inside me, something that would flip my entire world upside down. School was a battlefield. There was always drama, whether it was fights breaking out, whispered rumors, or teachers pushing me to do better when I couldn't even focus. I wasn't just arguing with people. I was getting into fights that left me drained and on edge. It felt like I was constantly defending myself from people who wanted to tear me down. Eventually, it became too much. Between the chaos at school and everything else I was dealing with, I made the decision to drop out. It wasn't an easy choice, but at the time it felt like the only way to escape the constant stress and drama. At home, things weren't much better. My family was barely getting by. The stress of bills and everyday life weighed on everyone, and I could feel it. We were in survival mode. Even though we loved each other, the tension was real, and sometimes it felt like the walls were closing in on us. One night, my mom, my sister, and I decided to walk to the store. We talked about random things as we strolled under the streetlights. Suddenly, my mom broke the flow of the conversation with a statement so blunt it knocked the wind out of me. "You're pregnant," she said, her tone serious. I froze for a second before laughing. "No, I'm not. You're crazy," I said, brushing it off. But my sister chimed in, nodding. "Yeah, I think you are too." They were so serious, but I couldn't stop laughing. Me? Pregnant? I had no symptoms, no clue. It was absurd. We kept walking, but my mom's words stuck with me, even as I tried to laugh them away. For the rest of the week, I couldn't get that conversation out of my head. Could I really be pregnant? I thought about how tired I'd been lately and the weird moments when I felt a little off. But no, it couldn't be true, could it? I kept pushing the idea to the back of my mind, hoping it would disappear. Life went on, but every time I looked at my mom, she had this knowing look, like she already had all the answers. The following week, my mom didn't even ask if I wanted to go to the doctor. She told me it was happening. We sat in the waiting room, and I stared at the walls, trying not to think about what we were here for. When the doctor, a tall man with a calm demeanor, came in with the results, everything stopped. "You're 4 months pregnant," he said. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. 4 months. How had I gone this long without knowing? I looked over at my mom, who sat quietly for a moment before saying, "I told you." But she told me, "We're going to get through this," she said, her voice steady and full of reassurance. Reality hit me like a brick. My carefree world was gone, replaced by something I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't just about me anymore. About 4 months later, we were all sitting in the living room. It was one of those quiet evenings when everything seemed still, but there was tension in the air. My mom turned to us and said, "We're moving." I blinked, confused. "Moving? What do you mean? Why?" She sighed. "There's too much going on here. The drama, the people. It's not good for you or for what's coming. We need to get out of here and start over." I didn't want to move. This place was all I'd ever known. The thought of leaving my friends, my school, and the streets I'd grown up on felt like losing a piece of myself. But I could tell this wasn't up for debate. My mom had made up her mind. It was what it was. Even though I didn't want to go, I knew deep down she was doing it for the right reasons. Staying meant more stress, more chaos, and more trouble. Moving gave us a chance at a fresh start, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. When we moved, I thought the drama would stay behind, but it didn't. The people I had issues with weren't ready to let things go, even from a distance. They started bringing the drama online, sending messages, throwing jabs, and going back and forth with me like they had nothing better to do. At first I engaged. I'd reply, argue, and defend myself. It was exhausting, and I started to realize it wasn't worth my energy. After a while I had enough. I blocked them all. The silence was immediate, and it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. With them out of the picture, I could finally focus on what mattered. I started living my life again, spending more time with my family and enjoying the small moments. The move gave me the fresh start I needed, and for the first time in a while, I felt at peace. My main focus became my family, sharing laughs, making memories, and preparing for the new chapter that was coming into my life. Some time went on, and everything was still going smoothly, but my mind was always racing. I couldn't stop thinking about what it would mean to become a mother. Would I be good enough? Would I be able to handle the responsibility? The question swirled in my head constantly, keeping me up some nights and making me overthink during the day. But alongside the worry, there was excitement. I couldn't wait to meet my baby, to hold them, to see their tiny face. The thought of starting this new chapter in my life made me nervous, but it also filled me with a sense of purpose. Even with all the uncertainty, I felt a strange mix of emotions that somehow balanced each other out. I was scared, but I was ready. Or at least, I was trying to be. A few weeks after finding out I was pregnant, I had my first real doctor's appointment. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt a mix of nerves and excitement as I walked into the office with my fiancé by my side. This appointment felt different, more real, like everything was starting to sink in. The doctor greeted us warmly and began the checkup. My fiancé sat close, watching quietly but intently. And then I heard it, the rapid, steady thumping of a heartbeat. "That's your baby," the doctor said with a smile. I couldn't stop smiling. My cheeks hurt from grinning so much, but I didn't care. Hearing that tiny heartbeat filled me with joy I couldn't put into words. I glanced at my fiancé, who was looking at me with a big smile. He was so happy. Hearing that heartbeat made everything feel so real. I wasn't just pregnant anymore. I was carrying a life, a tiny human with a heartbeat that was already filling the world with its own rhythm. That moment left me feeling excited and connected in a way I hadn't felt before. Some months went by, and the day I had been waiting for was finally here. It was time to find out what I was having. I was so excited, I could barely sit still. That morning, my fiancé couldn't come because he had to work, but my grandma was more than happy to step in. "I'll go with you," she said, her warm smile making me feel better about him missing it. We sat in the waiting room, chatting while I tried to calm my nerves. Then a nurse appeared in the doorway and called my name. My grandma and I stood up, and I felt a rush of excitement as we walked to the room together. Once we got settled, the technician entered, cheerful and professional. After a bit of preparation, the moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. "You're having a boy," the technician said with a warm smile. I felt a wave of emotions hit me all at once. Before I could even react, my grandma turned to me, her face lighting up. "You're having a boy," she repeated, her grin spreading from ear to ear. I couldn't stop smiling. Seeing her so happy made the moment even more special. Even though my fiancé couldn't be there, having my grandma by my side made the day unforgettable. It was a memory I knew I'd hold on to forever. As soon as my grandma and I got back to the car, I couldn't wait another second. I pulled out my phone and called my fiancé. When he answered, I blurted out the news, barely able to contain my excitement. "We're having a boy." There was a brief pause, and then he laughed. "I knew it," he said, his voice calm but filled with happiness. Hearing his reaction made me smile even more. "Well, now we have to start getting things ready for him," I said. "Let's go shopping tomorrow," he replied, excitement clear in his voice. When we got home after the appointment, The house was buzzing with curiosity. My mom, sister, and aunt were all there, waiting eagerly for me to share the news. As soon as I walked in, my mom looked at me expectantly. "Well?" she asked with a smile. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I'm having a boy," I said, grinning from ear to ear. Everyone lit up instantly. My mom smiled big, nodding in approval, while my sister and aunt exchanged excited glances. "A boy," my sister said, laughing. "That's so exciting." Seeing everyone so happy made me feel even more excited for what was to come. It was a moment I'd remember forever, not because of anything over the top, but because of the love and excitement we all shared. The very next day, me and my fiancé made plans to go baby shopping together. Walking through the aisles, picking out tiny outfits, and imagining what he'd look like, we were completely wrapped up in the moment. Every little onesie, every blanket, every pair of baby socks made us smile and laugh. For the first time in a long while, it felt like nothing else mattered. We were happy, excited for what was to come, and ready to take on this new chapter together. After all the excitement of the day, I decided to lay down and take a nap. The house had settled into a comfortable quiet, and I finally had a moment to myself. As I stretched out on my bed, I let my mind wander back to the events of the day. I thought about how happy everyone was, and how real everything was starting to feel. Just as I was drifting off, I felt it. A small, faint flutter. At first I wasn't sure, but then it happened again. I smiled to myself, not even moving. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. That little flutter was my baby saying, "I'm here." It was the perfect end to an already special day. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about names. I wanted something that felt strong, something that would stand out but also suit my baby perfectly. As I sat there, it hit me, Major. I let the name roll around in my head for a while, and the more I thought about it, the more I love it. Later that day, I turned to my fiancé. "What do you think about the name Major?" I asked, watching his face closely. He smiled and nodded. "I like it. Let's go with it." Hearing him agree sealed it for me. It felt like the right choice, but I wanted to see what everyone else thought. That evening I shared the name with my mom, my aunt, my grandma, and my sister. "I've been thinking," I said, a little nervous but excited. "What do you all think about the name Major?" There was a moment of silence before my grandma broke into a smile. "I like it," she said, her voice full of approval. My aunt and sister quickly agreed, their excitement making me feel even more confident. My mum, always more reserved, gave a small nod. "It's a good name," she said, and I knew that meant she liked it too. We sat around tossing out other ideas, laughing and debating, but every time we thought of a new name, we kept circling back to Major. It was like no other name could measure up. By the end of the night, everyone was on the same page. Major was the name. It felt powerful and special, just like this new chapter in my life. The last few months of my pregnancy had been smooth, filled with moments of excitement as I prepared for my baby's arrival. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. Then, early one morning, it all began. At around 4 a.m., I woke up to a sharp pain. My contractions had started. I took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. After a few minutes, it was clear. I needed to get to the hospital. I gently shook my fiancé awake. "It's time," I said, trying to stay calm. He quickly got dressed, still half asleep but ready to go. My mom joined us too, offering her steady presence to help keep me grounded. We all rushed to the hospital. When we arrived, the nurses got me checked in and settled. I was ready to hear, "It's happening," but instead the nurse gave me a sympathetic look. "You're only 2 centimeters dilated," she said gently. "We're going to have to send you back home for now. Try to rest and come back when things progress." I felt a wave of disappointment. I had been so sure that today was the day, but my baby wasn't ready just yet. We headed back home, and although I was a little frustrated, I knew this was only the beginning. I just had to wait a little longer for the moment I'd been dreaming of. After we got sent home from the hospital, I was trying to stay calm, but the contractions were relentless. All day they came in waves, each one worse than the last. By the afternoon, the pain was unbearable. I was crying non-stop, clutching my stomach, and at one point I ended up on the floor trying to find some kind of relief. The hours dragged on, and by the time night fell, it felt like the contractions had intensified even more. Every wave of pain hit harder than the last, leaving me physically and emotionally drained. It felt like the longest day of my life. Nothing seemed to help, and all I could do was hold on, knowing that eventually it would be time to go back to the hospital. Morning came, and the contractions became sharper, cutting through me with an intensity that left me struggling to breathe. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I felt like I couldn't handle it much longer. Hoping for some kind of help, I made my way to my Aunt Felicia's room. She noticed immediately how much pain I was in. Without hesitation, she grabbed a heating pad, plugged it in, and handed it to me. "Here, this should help," she said with calm reassurance. As I pressed the warm pad against my stomach, I could feel the heat soothing the pain. It didn't make it disappear, but it dulled the sharpness just enough to give me a small break. For the first time all morning, I felt like I could catch my breath. "Thank you," I said quietly, sinking into a chair and letting the warmth work its magic. That heating pad became my saving grace, allowing me to face the contractions with a little more strength. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me through the morning. The heating pad had helped me through the morning, giving me just enough relief to manage the contractions. But as time went on, the pain became unbearable again. By late morning, it was clear that I couldn't hold out any longer. My Aunt Felicia walked into the room and took one look at me. "It's time," she said, her voice calm but firm. She was right, I couldn't wait any longer. Around 12 p.m., my grandma stepped in to take me to Fairfax Hospital. She helped me into the car, and we were on our way. The ride was excruciating. Every bump and turn seemed to amplify the pain, but I focused on breathing, counting down the moments until we arrived. When we finally pulled up to the hospital, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The nurses quickly got me into a room, and I couldn't stop thinking, this has to be it. It's finally time. After getting settled in at the hospital, the nurses quickly got me prepped and gave me an epidural. As the medication kicked in, I felt a wave of relief. The pain wasn't completely gone, but it was so much better than before. For the first time in hours, I could breathe and focus. Not long after, the rest of my family began to arrive. My mom, sister, aunt, best friend, fiancé, and others filled the room, surrounding me with love and support. My sister and best friend stayed by my side most of the time, talking to me and asking how I was feeling. Their presence helped keep me grounded and distracted from the contractions. They made me smile and laugh with their constant encouragement and conversation, making sure I didn't feel alone. My fiancé would come over and talk to me here and there, checking in and letting me know he was there for me. But he gave me space while my sister and best friend stayed close. My mom, aunt, and the others helped lighten the mood, cracking jokes and making me laugh. The room was alive with love and chatter, and despite the situation, I felt so cared for. It truly felt like a whole village had come together just for me and my baby. In that moment, surrounded by everyone who mattered most, I felt strong, loved, and ready to take on whatever came next. For a while, we talked and laughed. My family and I shared stories and light-hearted moments, trying to make the time pass. It felt good to have everyone there with me, offering comfort and support. But as the hours went by, things started to change. The epidural, which had given me so much relief earlier, stopped working the way it had before. I began to feel sharp pain on one side of my body, and it only grew worse with each passing minute. The pain became unbearable. I started crying, unable to hold it in anymore. Every contraction felt like it was breaking me down, and soon it became harder to breathe. My chest tightened, and I was gasping for air. The nurses quickly stepped in. Seeing my distress, they brought in a breathing machine to help me. As the mask was placed over my face, I tried to focus on each breath, letting the machine do what my body couldn't. The laughter from earlier faded as concern filled the room. I felt overwhelmed and exhausted, but with my family still close by, I held on to the hope that this would all be over soon, and I'd finally meet my baby. The moment came when I knew I was ready to push. The pressure was immense, and the pain felt like it was taking over my entire body. I kept glancing at the door, waiting for the nurses and doctor to show up, but they were nowhere to be seen. Minutes felt like hours. My mom, seeing how much I was struggling, stepped into the hallway. "Where is the doctor?" she demanded, her voice sharp and full of urgency. "She's ready to push." Inside, I was losing patience. The pain was excruciating, and I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. When a nurse finally walked in, I snapped. "What's taking so long? I need help now!" I yelled, my voice filled with desperation. I cursed through the pain, feeling like I was being pushed past my breaking point. I couldn't believe how long I had been left waiting, but all I could think about was getting through this and finally meeting my baby. Eventually the doctor arrived, and I prepared myself for the next step. Relief washed over me, but I knew the hardest part was still to come. Once the doctor and nurses arrived, everything shifted into motion. It was time. They quickly started getting everything together, preparing for what was about to happen. "You got this," my family said, their voices filled with encouragement. My sister and best friend stayed right by my side, offering their support and reassuring me that I could do it. My fiancé, holding my hand tightly, looked at me with steady eyes. "You got this," he said, his voice calm but full of love. It was time to push, and I could feel the moment coming. The pressure was intense, but with each contraction I gave it everything I had. The first push, then the second, and by the third I felt him. He was right there. With one final push, I felt the relief wash over me as my baby was out. The room filled with his first cry, and I couldn't believe it. He was finally here. After he was born, the room was quiet for a moment as the nurses prepared to cut the umbilical cord. They asked who would do it. My fiancé stepped forward, trying to take the scissors, but when he saw the blood, he hesitated, his nerves getting the best of him. My mum was beside him, offering support, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Without missing a beat, my mum stepped in. Calm and steady, she took the scissors and cut the umbilical cord with confidence. It was a relief to have that moment over, and as my baby was placed in my arms, I felt everything fall into place. As I held my baby in my arms, a wave of love flooded over me. Everything I had been through, all the pain and waiting, faded into the background. It was just the two of us now, and in that moment, I felt a love so deep, so overwhelming, that words couldn't describe it. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I couldn't help but smile. This was the most precious moment of my life. I felt a connection, a bond that had been waiting to form, and it was stronger than anything I had ever known. It was pure love, unconditional and all-encompassing. After I held Major for a while, it was time for everyone else to get their turn. My fiancé was the first to hold him, a soft smile spreading across his face as he held Major in his arms. The love and awe in his eyes were clear as he looked down at him. Then, my mom held Major, her face glowing with pride and joy. My sister followed, smiling wide as she gently held him. My best friend took her turn next, her heart full of happiness as she held Major close. Everyone held Major, and everyone was in awe. The room was filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Major was surrounded by so much affection, and I felt incredibly blessed to have such a wonderful family. It was late, The day had been a blur of excitement and love, but now everyone had left, and it was just me and my fiancé in the hospital room with Major. It was dark outside, the quiet of the night settling in. Everything was calm. Major was peacefully resting in my arms, and for a moment it felt like everything was finally settling into place. But then, boom! Out of nowhere, a wave of emotions hit me like a freight train. It wasn't a gradual build-up. It was sudden and overwhelming. The calm I had felt moments ago shattered, and all at once it felt like the weight of the world was on me. I was holding Major, his small body resting against me, and yet I felt completely lost. The happiness I had been holding on to felt distant, replaced by something I couldn't explain. A sense of sadness, confusion, and fear overwhelmed me, and I couldn't shake it off. I held Major close, his presence grounding me, but it was like my world had just shifted in an instant. Postpartum had arrived, and it was nothing like I expected. My fiancé came over, looking at me with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I don't know," I replied, feeling lost and overwhelmed. He seemed to think something was physically hurting me, but it wasn't that. It was more of an emotional weight that I couldn't explain. He immediately called the nurse, and she came in shortly after. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I said again, my voice shaky. The nurse stayed with me quietly, not pushing, just being there until I started to feel better. My fiancé, exhausted from the day, had fallen asleep. 2 days passed, and it was finally time to go home. We were filled with excitement and a sense of relief. The nurse came in with our discharge papers and handed them to us with a smile. She wheeled in a hospital chair to roll me down to the car. As I sat there, I felt a rush of emotions. We were leaving the hospital, ready to start a new chapter with Major. My fiancé was standing nearby, carrying Major in his car seat. The moment felt surreal, but I was filled with joy knowing we were finally taking our little one home. It was time. The ride home was quiet, but in a peaceful way. We weren't in a rush, just taking it all in. Major was safely tucked in his car seat, and my fiancé and I were talking softly, trying to soak in the reality of what had just happened. We shared little laughs, talking about how different life was going to be now. It was hard to believe we were finally going home with Major, ready to start our new chapter together. The car ride felt comforting, like the calm before the storm of what was to come, but we were both ready for this new adventure. When we got home, the house was filled with joy. Everyone was so excited to see us. My mom, grandma, aunt and sister were all there, waiting with big smiles and open arms. My mom was the first to hold Major. Her face lit up with so much love as she gently took him in her arms. My aunt, grandma and sister followed, all eager to hold him, their eyes full of happiness. The room was filled with warmth, laughter and love as everyone took their turn holding Major. It was the perfect way to start this new chapter of our lives, surrounded by so much love and support. A little later, my fiancé helped me get settled into the room. Everything was good, and even after he left to take care of something, things were still smooth. My family was still there, offering support and making sure I was okay. But then, Major started crying. Oh my gosh! That's when postpartum depression hit me again, out of nowhere. Every time Major cried, I cried too. The sound of his cries overwhelmed me, and I couldn't stop. We were both crying, and it felt like I couldn't catch my breath. My sister must have heard it because she quickly came into the room. She gently took Major from my arms and asked, "Are you okay, sis?" I couldn't answer. I just couldn't find the words. She told me to get some rest and left the room. But as soon as she walked out, the tears came even harder. I buried my face into the pillow, feeling lost and overwhelmed. I stayed in my room almost the whole week, unable to shake the heaviness of what I was feeling. But my family kept checking on me, offering their support and making sure I was okay, even when I couldn't fully express what was going on. My family knew it was postpartum depression, and they were there for me 100%. They supported me without hesitation, and my fiancé stood by my side through it all. I still held Major, I still cared for him, but every time he cried, I felt completely overwhelmed. I would take him to my mom or grandma, needing a break from the pressure of it all. After handing him over, I would go back to my room, shut the door, and cry. I would scream into the pillow, not knowing how to process what I was feeling. I couldn't stop wondering what was wrong with me. I felt like I was failing Major, like I wasn't good enough. It was hard to shake the feeling of being a bad mother, but my family was there, offering reassurance and support, even when I couldn't find the strength to ask for it. They understood, and they stayed with me, helping me through every moment. Some months went by, and things started to get a little better. The intensity of postpartum depression began to ease, but I wasn't fully free from it. I dealt with it until Major was 3, though I was learning to cope as time went on. No one knew, except for my loved ones and those closest to me. I kept it to myself, even though it felt like a constant weight. There were still tough days when I couldn't shake the sadness, but with each passing month, I found more strength. It wasn't easy, but I was getting better. I was learning how to manage it, with the unwavering support of my family and fiancé, who never left my side. To all the mothers out there struggling with postpartum depression, know that you are not alone. The emotions you are feeling are valid, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have tough days, and it doesn't make you any less of a mother. You are doing the best you can, and that's enough. Take it one step at a time, lean on your loved ones for support, and be kind to yourself. Healing takes time, and with patience, strength and support, you will get through it. Your journey is unique, and you deserve all the love and care you give to others. You are enough. Love. Thanks for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.